Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the this European Food Forum and US mission to the EU event entitled EU-US Dialogue on Sustainable Packaging. My name is Angelo Di Mambro. I'm an Italian journalist based in Brussels. I've been working on food and agriculture at the level scene for more than 10 years now. I will be the moderator of the meeting. A few words from my side. So at the end of May in Paris, a meeting of the United Nations Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on a treaty to reduce plastic will take place, and at European level we have the current discussion is on new rules for packaging and packaging waste, and tomorrow there would be an interesting step of the process, of the legislative process, with the presentation of the report from the European Parliament in the ENVI committee. This coincidence means and implies and explains better than 1,000 words that packaging and packaging waste is a global issue. And so today, the European Food Forum and the United States mission to the EU organized this event to discuss. To make experts from the two sides meet in looking for practical solutions, pragmatic solutions to the issue of waste, packaging waste. We will try to answer to two questions, or to give possible answer to two questions that are which regulatory framework can promote feasible solutions and foster innovation while reducing packaging waste, and how can research and innovation help support the transition to more circular packaging. A brief intro of the European Food Forum. The European Food Forum is an independent, politically led, non-partisan forum led and governed by elected members of the European Parliament. It aims to promote open multi-stakeholders dialogues and sustainable food systems among policymakers, food supply chain actors, civil society organizations, research and academia, and other public institutions. It was funded at the end of 2019 by 5 MEPs from 5 different countries and 3 political groups. And now the EFF has 37 MEPs covering all the 7 political groups of the European Parliament. The European Food Forum does not itself take position on a specific policy issue. The event of today is possible thanks to the hosting of 4 MEPs. Madame Irène Tolleré, she is also the European Food Forum chair. Mr. Pietro Fiocchi, that has joined us. Marlene Mortler, Christine Schneider. We are online, so this is an open debate, so every participant can ask questions raising the virtual hand. The only thing that I recommend is that the questions are short, let's say the 1 minute maximum. The event will be recorded. The event has the participation of journalists, and the interpretation is in English and German. As usual, in the registration process, European Food Forum asked to submit questions and collected some of them. I will make good use of those questions in the Q&A sessions. The event is organized in 2 panels. At the end of each panel, there will be a Q&A session. I would start. And start from the opening remarks of MEPs Fiocchi, Mortler, and Schneider, and after that, Trip Taylor, the Agri-Attaché of the US mission to the EU. So, Mr. Fiocchi, the floor is yours for 3 minutes for the opening remarks. No. Okay.
First the ladies.
Ladies first. Huh? Oh, so you know, yeah. Maybe Madame Mortler has
Yes,
thanks.
I will start today. Thank you, Angelo. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to you all. Now I switch in German. Vielen Dank für Ihr Kommen. Ich grüße Sie alle sehr herzlich. Unser Thema heute, US-EU Dialogue on Sustainable Packaging. Wer isst nicht gerne einen Parmesankäse aus Italien oder Serrano-Schinken aus Spanien? Wer ist nicht begeistert vom größten Binnenmarkt der Welt? Wir Verbraucherinnen und Verbraucher schätzen es, Spezialitäten und Köstlichkeiten unserer europäischen Nachbarn unkompliziert zu genießen. Aber egal ob Tomaten aus der Region oder Bananen aus Übersee, für den Transport, für die Lagerung von Waren und eben von Lebensmitteln braucht es Verpackungen. Weltweit kommen dabei unzählige Tonnen an Material zusammen. Im schlimmsten Fall finden wir diese Materialien in unseren Weltmeeren. Verpackungen spielen nichtsdestotrotz eine wichtige Rolle beim Schutz von Lebensmitteln, der Qualität und damit der Haltbarkeit, gerade bei frischen und leicht verderblichen Lebensmitteln. Bei Geruch, Farbe, Geschmack und so weiter. Aber Verpackungen müssen umweltfreundlich sein. Weniger Rohstoffverbrauch ist angesagt und mehr Kreislaufwirtschaft. Die Überarbeitung der Verpackungsrichtlinie muss nun die Weichen dafür richtig stellen. Sie darf gerade aus meiner persönlichen Sicht die kleinen regionalen Betriebe nicht unter die Regulierungsräder bringen. Ich freue mich nun auf eine offene Debatte zwischen unterschiedlichen Interessengruppen mit hoffentlich klugen Lösungen statt Verboten. Vielen herzlichen Dank.
Yeah, vielen herzlichen Dank, Marlene. Thank you so much, Marlene. There are some points I don't have to repeat because you underline it, but I'm very happy that we will discuss today in this panel discussion sustainable packaging. And I want to say great thankful for Luisella. Thank you so much. You organized so great. Thank you so much for your whole work and for the organization. As a former shadow rapporteur of the Farm to Fork strategy, I'm very happy that the European Commission proposed a revision of packaging and packaging waste legislation. Packaging plays a key role for sustainable and resistant food system by protecting essential food, supporting availability of diversity of nutrition, food, and contribution of the EU objectives for reducing the food waste. And Marlene underlines this, and I think it's very, very important. According to the European Commission, more than 25 million tons of plastic waste is generated in the European every year. Of this, less than 30% is currently collected for recycling. Very large amounts of plastic waste enter the environment from a wide variety of sources, causing significant economic and environmental damaging. The Commission always underlined this, and therefore by 2030 the Commission wants the plastic packaging put on the EU market to be reusable, wiederverwendbar, and recyclable at low costs. And at the beginning I said I welcome, but this proposal comes to a very critical time for food resilience and security and sustainability. And I think we must be very, very careful on the European level for overburdened domestic SMEs, and that we will risk the food security and the food affordability. And I think some members of the European Parliament has realized this. I'm not sure if the Commission realized what happens 2020 in the February, and that it has consequence for all of us, for us as consumer, for the SMEs, and I think also for the politics. And for me, I think we had a lot of important topics in the Farm to Fork strategy. For example, how we can reduce food waste. But until now, we have not the proposal from the Commission to reduce the food waste. And so I think, or I'm not sure if the important points are put in the right position. And Marlene says to ban plastic as packaging in the food market is the wrong way. Because if we want to reduce food waste, we have also to look how we can package food that it's longer time to eat it. So it's not only one view on the thing, and we not only have one solution. I think we need a puzzle, different mosaic stones to put together, and that gives the whole picture. And for me, it's also important to look how we can put more plastic packaging in the recycling. And as a member of the Parliament, we are a lot around in the European Union. In Germany, we have the green points, and we have in Brussels here, I think I have to put in the blue bag. And I think it's the first step that we say we have all the same system, the same pictures, that it's not important where you are, so you have the same collected system, that everybody understands it. And I think there we can reduce that plastic packaging goes in the normal rubbish, and we can collect it and can use it again. So that are the points from me. I'm very open for your discussion, and thank you so much. And thank you, Pietro, because you are a gentleman. I know this.
I apologize because I was on a call with Ambassador Verrecchio, the Italian delegation, which obviously was asking me about packaging, CLP regulation, revision of REACH, and so on. So it's quite a difficult moment because there is a lot of things coming through the ENVI committee, but also the parliament. Regarding packaging, you know, I agree with what my colleague just said. I will add a few more points which are more from an entrepreneur point of view. Which is, for example, the goal to have a minimum recycled content on all the packaging. And this is a problem in Europe. It's not a problem from a technical point of view, but it's a problem from a quantity and flow point of view. Because if you look at the approach that the different member states have taken to recycling of the packaging, you see a completely different picture. You go from Italy, which is the number 1 in recycling. Sorry if I'm happy about this, but by the way, we collect in a differentiated way 14 different types of waste, which is quite complex in Italy. And then you go to other countries, and I will not mention these other countries, which are recycling probably less than 2%. So one of the problems in setting a goal in 40% of minimum recycled content in packaging is that there will not be enough recycled material unless all the member states in Europe will start collecting and recycling in a very serious way. And this is a problem. So it's absurd, but there will be companies that will buy virgin material from Turkey and declare it as a recycled material to be within the EU regulation. So this is crazy. This is really crazy. There are several other things, of course, the Italian position is totally against the reuse because, of course, we have a very strong recycling economic sector. And so from an economic point of view, from a point of view of the jobs, for us, this is a problem to destroy the recycling to go toward the reuse. But generally speaking, for the European continent, the reuse is a problem, especially in food, like rightly so Christine was saying, and medicine, because some of the recycling material is not up to standard to actually preserve food, and you have a whole bunch of other problems from a health point of view. So, consider the typical square in every city in Europe. You have a McDonald's, a Burger King, kebab, and so on and so on and so on. Everybody gets something and then throws the packaging in normal waste. And then what you have to do, pick them up, decide, oh, this goes to McDonald's, this goes to Burger King, this goes to that, and use water. And now we have a problem because we do not have enough water for agricultural use. And now we want to use more water and more detergent to do the reuse. And this is crazy. This is crazy. So there are several topics which are extremely important, but I want to listen to all of you because I think, a strong feeling of what the situation is, and you have a lot of news about your own countries and how things are done and everything else, because again, Europe is not one Europe. It's totally different in terms of the approach to the recycling, reuse, use for production of energy, or simply incinerators or landfill. So from this point of view, I'm going to be here and listen to your opinion, and I will be very happy to hear. Thank you.
Thanks to Mr. Fiocchi. Trip Taylor.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I'm Trip Taylor with the U.S. mission to the European Union. I just want to say how grateful we are to be here today, and to our friends in the European Parliament for sponsoring this event, and for our friends in the European Food Forum and Luisella in particular for partnering with us to host this really important dialogue. I want to say that environmental sustainability really is one of the core priorities of the Biden administration. And here in Brussels as attachés, we have the privilege of working with our European partners to enhance dialogue on these really important shared environmental objectives. These are very complicated topics, and I think we have a lot to learn from each other and a lot to gain from these kinds of discussions. So I just want to, again, convey our enthusiasm for the topics at hand, our appreciation for our panelists and the range of expertise and perspectives that they share, and really just a call to hopefully be able to build on this for future engagement and enhance US-EU relations on sustainability even more than the progress we've already made today. So again, thank you very much. Look forward to the discussion ahead.
Thanks to Trip Taylor. And so let's start to learn from each other. The first panel is about the European approach towards a more sustainable packaging. And the panelists have, that I remembered you have 5 minutes each, and then we will start the Q&A. Aurel Ciobanu Dordea of the DG Envy of the European Commission, Marco Pierani, Director of Public Affairs and Media Relations of Euroconsumers, Dirk Jacobs, Director of Food Drink Europe, and Wouter Vermeulen, Senior Director of Sustainability and Public Policy Europe at the Coca-Cola Company. Please, Mr. Ciobanu Dordea.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thanks a lot to the MEPs who work together under the label of the European Food Forum, and thanks also to the US mission to the European Union for organizing yet another debate between stakeholders And it's not for the first time that the Commission sits in front of the different stakeholders or at the same table with the different stakeholders. We had a public consultation about the legislative proposal on for the revision of the rules on packaging and packaging waste, and we had bilateral dialogues with business organizations and with individuals players on the market. So, and the proposal which is brought forward is substantiated by a very complex impact assessment, which is also public. You mentioned, you the moderator, Mr. Di Mambro, you mentioned at the beginning that there are two things taking place at the same time. One, the international negotiations for a global plastic agreement, and secondly, the tabling of this proposal by the European Commission. And you said it's a coincidence. No, it's no coincidence, and we know that there are no coincidences when it comes to public policy. It shows that there is a growing concern for the sustainability in this area, and it shows even more that there is a big problem. And the initiative from the European Commission at the level and the measures we are proposing at the level of the European Union come in a global context, which further casts light about the imperative need to take structural measures to reverse completely, not just to move the needle, but to reverse the trends. Because at the current pace of the developments, as it is shown in the impact assessment which accompanies our proposal, in 2030, in 2040, we will go to totally unsustainable levels of consumption. And indeed, only two figures illustrate why it is necessary to take active measures. 40% of the plastics in the European Union and 50% of the paper is used for packaging. This is very important. So, it is also important to bear in mind the fact that the current rules, the Directive on Packaging and Packaging Waste, date back from 1994. And under the form of a directive, so 30 years ago, and under the form of a directive, they have allowed the member states gradually, member states who operate, whose economic operators work on a single market nominally, the member states have been allowed by the form of a directive to take national regulatory measures within the framework of this directive, which impact and have created an uneven playing field on a market which should be homogeneous, and the playing field should be level. Rules on labeling, rules on recycled content, on recyclability, and on many other aspects which generate discrepancies and make the economic operators lose the benefits of the scale of the European market. So one more reason to act, and I would like to add to this also the current context. And you have referred, indeed, I think MEP Schneider has referred what has happened in 2020, the COVID crisis. Yes, it was a lesson in more than one respect. And we look at the impacts on the global supply chains that the COVID crisis has created, and we look at the post-COVID developments on the global supply chains and the energy crisis, and also the tensions between Europe and some of the global providers of fossil fuels, and the need to decarbonize our economies, therefore to rely less on the contribution of fossil-based plastics and other similar resources. So we need also, we believe that we need to take measures that would make the sector of packaging more sustainable, not only in the light of, also through the prism of the features that the packaging should have, the sustainability features, but to help Europe become less dependent on primary resources and external suppliers, and to put the packaging sector on a track for climate neutrality by 2050. I would like to draw your attention very briefly that there are 6 key measures, which are structural measures, active measures, which underpin the regime which is proposed by the European Commission, and which shows that this regime, that this proposal relies on several components and must be looked at not in the fragmentation of a measure of another, but to look at globally. We need to look at the entire system global in its synergies and in the economies of scale and complementarities that it brings forward. Which are these 6 key measures? First, for waste prevention, a reduction target of packaging waste of 15% by 2040 was defined for each member state compared to 2018. This reduction will concretely happen through measures of both reuse and recycling. Secondly, to address unnecessary packaging, certain forms of packaging are proposed to be banned. For example, single-use packaging for food and beverages when consumed inside restaurants and cafes, single-use packaging for fruits and vegetables, miniature shampoo bottles. Thirdly, many measures also aim to make packaging fully recyclable by 2030. This includes setting design criteria for packaging, creating mandatory deposit return systems for plastic bottles and aluminum cans, making it clear which types of packaging can be compostable so that consumers can throw these to bio-waste, and keeping these categories of compostable plastics limited in order to take into account the carbon footprint of compostability as well. So we need to strike the fair balance. 4, there are mandatory rates of recycled content that producers have to include in new plastic packaging. This will help to turn recycled plastic into a valuable raw material, as it is already shown by the example of PET bottles in the context of the Single-Use Plastics Directive. And here I come to, or I address some of the concerns expressed by MEP Fiocchi, Schneider, and Mortler. We really have the possibility to create European-wide markets of secondary raw materials and recyclates, and put a better price on recycling and recyclability. But we can start doing this only if we make the first steps and if we set ambitious objectives. 5th, the proposal clarifies the confusion about sorting. Technically, every packaging will carry a label showing in which waste stream it should go. Waste collection containers will carry the same labels, and the same symbols will be used everywhere in the European Union to address some of the concerns that you have expressed, because you see blue bags in Belgium and green and yellow bags in Germany. Maybe we cannot change the color of the bins or of the bags because the economic costs for municipalities and ultimately for citizens will be very high, but with the appropriate labeling on both packaging and on the bins, we can help consumers to direct the packaging waste to the right bins and to increase the or to improve the efficiency of separate collection and the efficiency of the recycling systems. Last, companies will have to offer to consumers a certain percentage of their products in reusable or refillable packaging, for example, takeaway drinks and meals or e-commerce deliveries. This will also come with standardization of formats and clear labeling of reusable packaging. Before concluding my intervention, I would like also, because I have heard also in this house of the European Parliament and from many stakeholders, some of them present here today, a lot of concerns being expressed about the threat to the food safety, food security, which would be entailed by the introduction of some of the obligations if they would be endorsed by this House and by the other House of the European legislature, which is the Council of the European Union. We would respectfully not only submit, but we are able to point at the solutions which will make sure that there will be no such threat in the future to food security or food safety. The measures we are proposing to do away with individual packaging for fruits and vegetables are accompanied by exemptions where this individual packaging is indispensable for vulnerable fruits and vegetables, but not all are vulnerable. And this will be a major contribution to the prevention of packaging minimization and prevention of packaging waste. In terms of quality of the food grade packaging material, there are the European Commission working together, the different services of the Commission, DG Santé, DG Environment, and other services will make sure that never obligations enter into force if the enough material is not available on the market and this material does not meet food grade quality. And our proposal includes emergency measures which can be taken by the Commission in order to avoid any threat to food safety and security. And I would like also to draw your attention, and this is my last remark, that we need to put faith in technologies in two things. Into packaging solutions and marketing solutions which already exist on the European market in both advanced member states and less advanced member states. I draw your attention to the fact that currently shops, and not minor, marginal, but mainstream shops, big chains, sell fruits and vegetables without individual packaging. There are solutions which do not generate food waste, more food waste than usual. Secondly, we need to put faith in technological developments which are at our doorstep. And actually, we have technologies and important economic operators from Europe and North America, in particular from the United States, operate in Europe technologies such as chemical recycling, which are capable to generate in certain conditions, of course, and we need to pay attention to the details, but they generate at large scale recycling and production of a feedstock for packaging, which is at food grade quality. So do not be afraid. Thanks a lot. And work with us in order to make this legislative proposal land in the optimum conditions. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mr. Ciobanu d'Ordea. Marco Pierani, the point of view of consumers.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation to the European Food Forum and from the US mission on this very timely debate. 80 million tons, that is how much waste packaging is generated each year in the EU, which means 177.2 kilograms per EU citizen. This is worrying, and this makes feel also consumer on the side of consumer responsible. Consumer want to play their part in this problem. A Euroconsumer survey identified waste management as one of the areas where there is the highest consumer responsibility. In fact, consumer put the most effort with avoiding plastic packaging and opting for products with less packaging. In another survey, which we produced not only in the countries where we are, Euroconsumer is in 4 countries in Europe, Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Belgium. We are also in Brazil. This survey we have done together with BEUC, the umbrella organization, the European Consumer Organization, where we work with them, and our national member are also member of BEUC. And in this survey, one of the results is that 85% of the consumer interviewed in these 11 countries are supporting new rules on this topic in order to solve this problem. Ironically, the same survey result also identify that waste management is one of the most critical issue in order to make consumer active. Very often consumer lament not clear and on how to manage the packaging material, if reuse or recycling. So to make the green shift require consumer to be on board. And this is also for waste. That's why Euroconsumer welcomes the European Commission proposal. And it's aimed to promote a more efficient use of material and reduce packaging waste. However, in order to make sure it is fit for purpose and can truly live up to the challenge, Euroconsumer has developed a consumer checklist with 5 criteria to be considered, hopefully, when designing the final text of the legislation. The first criteria is coming up from our DNA. Our DNA as consumer organization is the DNA of starting from science. And decision need to be based on independent technical and scientific study that analyze the entire life cycle of packaging products. The Commission proposal strongly favor reuse of packaging. It is true that a reusable approach leads to lower quantities of waste produced. However, when considering the whole life cycle analysis, it might happen that a reusable approach leads to higher environmental impact that then drop-off points or deposit refund system for single-use packaging. That's because for a full scientific analysis, the environmental impact generated by transport, reverse logistics, washing, disinfection, sterilization, and reusable packaging also need to be taken into account. That's why it is crucial to develop an entire life cycle analysis to really ensure the most sustainable approach to packaging and packaging waste. So that's the first, I have only other 4, but I will be quick. The second one is safety first. It's a second, but we say safety first. So in recycling and in reuse, there should not be drawback for the health of consumer, I would say, of people. Reusable packaging and recycled content both require measures to minimize and cut out hazardous substances from packaging material to safeguard consumer health. Third point, it's keep it simple. We need to be careful with the introduction of overlapping systems for the same type of materials, as this could lead to further confusing consumers. Fourth point, this is a transversal point that we have in our approach to all the sustainability dossier, which focus on affordability. In order to have a more sustainable society, we need to make sustainability behavior affordable. And this is true also in order to also enlarge the critical mass of consumer behaving in a sustainable way. And this is also true for waste management. Waste management systems need to be affordable for consumer. If it comes at a higher cost, it will be challenging to accept and to reach the target. Finally, the last point, but is very important though, is the power of information. Empowerment of consumer start with the right information. Clear communication and educational campaign are needed. Likewise, it is also needed a clear labeling in the European Union. And that's my 5th point. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Marco Pierani. Dirk Jacobs, the point of view of Food Drink Europe.
Thank you very much, Dirk Jacobs, Director General of Food Drink Europe, representing the European food and drink manufacturing sector, indirectly counting some 294,000 companies. Thank you very much to the EFF and to the US mission for this very timely debate. Just to say on the US mission, we will be going to Washington next week to reaffirm the transatlantic relationship. It's very much needed. But I appreciate that we can today also shed some light on the food-specific considerations on the packaging and packaging waste file, where sometimes we feel that food is not necessarily taken completely on board, and the specifics were already mentioned by the honorable MEPs. Let's be clear from the outset, there's no doubt that we need to move towards a circular economy for packaging, including for food and drink. And to date, and the figures are showing this, was already mentioned, we collectively are not equipped to scale the change. And it's also recognized even by the EU agencies. So for instance, a recent study from the European Investment Bank showed that the EU has to close an investment gap of at least 6.7 billion euros to meet its targets of reaching 10 million tons of plastic recycling, to meet the plastic recyclates in products on the EU market by 2025. So there's a huge investment gap that needs to be handled if we really want to reach the targets that have been set out. And in that sense, the packaging and packaging waste regulation provides a huge opportunity to make markets function better. Today, the markets are clearly not functioning because we're not moving into the direction that is desired. But that also requires providing the enablers and the incentives for companies to make that transition faster and further. And this is something where we are very concerned about when it comes to the support that companies are getting today. We are very supportive of the general objectives and ambitions that have been set out by the packaging and packaging waste regulation, notably that it harmonizes, it ensures the well-functioning single market for packaging materials and products that are packaged more sustainably across EU member states. And I want to insist on that because there are some voices that want to sort of go back to the directive, that would like to have more fragmentation. And I think that is really not desirable if we want to go into the same direction. We also welcome that it comes with a comprehensive set of complementary actions. So it's about recycling, it's about reuse, when it makes more sense from an environmental point of view. And I indeed take the point that it is needed to have a life cycle assessment approach there. But it's also about upscaling packaging recyclability, circularity, and also moving towards reducing packaging where that is feasible. And I think, again, there, the food-specific nature needs to be understood when it comes to safety, when it comes to quality, when it comes to shelf life, when it comes to providing information to consumers and transparency and traceability, but also to the value added of packaging that is used for food and drinks that are being exported across the entire world. The EU is the largest exporter of food and drink in the world, and packaging has a role to play in the valorization of the great food and drink products that we produce here in Europe. So that needs to be also considered in this consideration. So if we really want to deal effectively with drastically cutting packaging waste, because that is actually where the biggest problem lies, We need to have a proper post-consumer use management in the form of high rates of collection, proper separate collection, well-functioning and large capacity sorting and recycling infrastructures. So it's more the infrastructure that is needed in order for our companies to make that transition really a reality. Without that, it is sort of very nice to have the target set, but we will never be able to reach those. So what do we need? Coherence and consistency with other packaging-related legislation. Food contact materials has been used, and I take it indeed that there is that attention. But also it is about proper sequencing of the legislation. There are a lot of delegated acts foreseen in this regulation. And if you give companies only a few years' time to implement, it will not happen. So an example is the design for recycling rules that will only come into place in 2028, whereas in 2030 we need to reach the targets. So how are companies going to do that? It doesn't take 1 to 2 years to implement these kind of changes. That takes maybe 4 to 5 years. So we need to think about proper timelines and practical sequencing. We also need to collaborate, because if there is no recyclable material available, then how can we reach those targets? It was already mentioned by the Honourable MEP. And we need to give manufacturers the choice, the freedom of materials choice, to see where they can make their biggest impacts in their operations rather than dictating a specific way of doing so. We cannot move just to completely to reuse. In some cases, it just doesn't make sense. In some cases, recycling is a better way, but give that flexibility to also encourage innovation. Honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very complex piece of legislation. I think you require a PhD to fully understand it. And if I would be an SME, a small company where the CEO is at the same time also the packaging expert, would have no clue what to do by when. So let's be cautious. Let's choose quality over speed, not wanting to delay anything as such, not wanting to decrease the ambition, but let's make sure that it is a pragmatic way that facilitates and enables rather than stifles progress. So if not, we will lose precious time and we will not reach those targets. This legislation will change the way companies operate, because it's not only about the packaging of food products, it's also about transport packaging, for instance, that are used, and packaging that is used inside factories and so forth. These investments have already been made by our industry in the past years. The business strategies have been adapted to that. So if we were now to completely change that direction, the companies would lose out on competitiveness. SMEs would face additional burdens, and this would be very difficult. So there needs to be an alignment between the policy direction and the business investment direction. So we look very much forward to the wisdom of the honourable members here, and also in the council, to improve the proposal where we can and to provide really a realistic pathway for our sector. If we can achieve this, you can count on us to do the utmost to deliver and to lead that transition. So thank you very much.
Thanks to Dirk Jacobs. And now Mr. Vermeulen, Senior Director of Sustainability and Public Policy Europe at the Coca-Cola Company. 5 minutes for you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And first of all, appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you all. Thank you for the invitation. I'll try to address 3 things, some context, maybe a word about what we are doing as a company, because we've been talking a lot what the regulator should be doing, what others should be doing. And then finally, obviously, I will also share 1 or 2 views on the current policy debate here in Europe. But I think it's very clear that in order to meet the SDG 2030 goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, that won't happen without transitioning and transforming food systems, right? So the way in which we produce our food, which we sell our food, how we consume our food. And that's why Coca-Cola, alongside our bottling partners, we have set a net zero greenhouse gas emission targets by 2040. Now, to meet our 2040 net zero target, that won't happen without meaningfully addressing packaging. Packaging accounts for 40% of our emissions here in Europe. So the way out is actually to reduce the amount of packaging that we use and the packaging that we use to ensure that it's fully circular in a closed loop, okay? So how do we get there? Well, we have a global strategy called World Without Waste, where we want to ensure that all of our packaging is recyclable, fully recyclable by 2025. We want to collect a can and a bottle for each one we bring to the market by 2030. We have a commitment to reduce our virgin plastics, and we also have a commitment to ensure that 25% of our global volume by 2030 comes in reusable packaging, which aligns well, with some of the provisions in the current legislation. What are we doing in terms as a company? A few examples, but for instance, Sprite used to come in a green bottle. It now comes in a clear bottle to ensure that we actually enhance recyclability and that we actually enhance access to feedstock. We are doing away with shrink wraps around our cans and replacing it by recyclable cardboard so that we do away with unnecessary and hard to recycle plastics. In 19 markets here in Europe, at least one SKU is in 100% rPET. In 8 countries in Europe, our full portfolio of PET bottles is 100% recycled PET. We are ahead of the legislation in terms of implementing teeter caps and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work that we are doing. We just published our global sustainability report. You can read it at your ease, our progress, but also our challenges and where we continue our acceleration to meet our goals. And then, that leads me to, having some thoughts about the current discussion here in Europe on the packaging waste regulation, which we actually welcome because it aligns very well with the belief of many of us in the industry that we need to observe, the waste hierarchy, right? And that, we need to work along the principles of that. But allow me 2 points, because it is a very complex piece of legislation. I'd like to call out 2 quite important elements for our company and also for our industry. The first one is collection and access to material. It was referenced by MEP Fichiori that indeed there is a problem around availability of material. That's why we need to accelerate our work on deposit return schemes. We are fully supportive of well-designed DRS schemes, but at the same time, there is also a problem of access to material. 68% of the PET material from beverage bottles, it's actually downcycled. It's used in t-shirts and carpets, right? So we as an industry and as a company, we are responsible for the food quality of our materials. We are responsible to attain the rPET targets. We are responsible for litter cleanup costs. But when our bottles are collected and recycled, all of a sudden it's out of our hands and they end up in a car carpet. So our ask to the legislator is, can we consider some kind of a fair access so that actually the industries that are supposed to meet those high rPET targets can actually do that with food grade quality material, because that is obviously the point for food and beverage. So that is one. Then secondly, in the intervention of the representative of the Commission, you called out faith and belief in technology, to which we fully sign up. So I believe that the legislation that we're currently discussing should be legislating for the future, not legislating for the past, or even worse, for the present, and just based on the solutions that we have today. There's a lot of innovation happening in packaging in our company and in many other companies as well. So if we look at reuse and if we look at the targets that are being discussed, we strongly suggest to actually take inspiration from the model that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has brought forward with the 4 quadrants that covers, refill at home. For instance, we have a solution in Germany where you put some drops of a syrup in carbonated water at home, and then you have a great tasting beverage. Refill on the go, the dispensed machines, freestyle machines, and other. Return from home, the milkman, but also, the returnable bottles, PET bottles that you can bring back to the supermarket and get refilled in the factories. And then obviously also return on the go. So if we really want to ensure that we are forward-looking and that the legislation is actually supporting innovation, it needs to come with a wide definition of what counts towards reuse. Because all of those different models that I described, they all have their different environmental impacts, and they all come with trade-offs and decisions to be made but what they have in common is actually that they work towards waste prevention and the reduction of the use of single-use beverage packaging. So that would be my plea to ensure that we have a broad enough definition that allows for innovation. And then finally, I think it is very important to bring the consumer along, right? We need to think through the eyes of the consumer, the behavior of the consumer, and we need to acknowledge that there is still a lot that we need to learn and experiment with, right? So that is another reason why we need to legislate for the future and allow innovation, but that's also another reason why we actually need everyone to chip in and ensure that all of the operators, everyone that brings packaging to the market has a role to play, because it's only by driving scale that we will also be able to actually change consumer behavior along the direction that we all want, is actually to reduce the footprint of our packaging. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Vermeulen. We have now the Q&A session. I don't know if we have no question from online. So I would hear somebody. No, I would raise a question. A question has been raised on life cycle assessment from two of the panelists, and this is echoing also a question that EFF has received online in the submission of the registration procedure from Rafael Arras of Michigan State University. He says that the regulation does not consider the product's life cycle, and two of the panelists are saying almost the same. So I would ask you about this LCA. About the LCA in the regulation, Mr. Chobauder there.
Yeah, thank you very much. The model used by the Commission in the impact assessment, which is available in the background study to the impact assessment, is aligned with the principles of product environmental footprint. The model calculated the changes in mass flows resulting from the implementation of the proposed measures. The model was used to calculate the financial, environmental, and social impacts. The scope of the environmental impact assessment included impacts from the manufacturing, waste collection, and treatment, sorting, recycling, incineration, landfill, and transport processes. The impact assessment has showed that the proposal can result in environmental benefits in the form of carbon dioxide emission savings by 23 million tons by 2030 compared to the baseline scenario. Water use is reduced by 1.1 million cubic meters. The monetized environmental externalities are reduced by 6.4 billion euros relative to the baseline scenario. Annual savings have been estimated at around 100 euros per citizen. Impacts on employment are estimated to result in a slight net increase of about 29,000 green jobs. So this is in a nutshell, I mean, the key figures underpinning the evaluation of the environmental, economic, and social consequences. Now, the real challenge comes from a limited number of manufacturers, in particular those which are active in the production of the single-use packaging, which have come with, as we know very well, with alternative impact assessments, more recent, in which they look at certain aspects of the performance of the single-use packaging. But we draw the attention of everyone that still their analysis is not holistic and does not look at the entire life cycle analysis. In particular, also, for instance, the carbon emissions and also the water consumption in particular. Maybe the carbon emissions, they look at them and what they say it is the proposal of the Commission is more critical from the perspective of the carbon emissions, but we submit that not all the impacts, in particular those on water and maybe on biodiversity, are taken into account. Again, allow me to repeat in one sentence what I have said at the beginning. we need to look at the problem in a holistic way and to look at the complementarity of the different solutions. And as I have mentioned once in another meeting, also in the European Parliament, we don't claim that every detail is, how to say, cast in stone and cannot find better alternatives. But we need to look at the overall balance. We are ready to look into the details of one element or another. Maybe certain obligations can be tailored differently. But again, on the one of the most critical points where the criticism of the life cycle analysis comes is about the takeaway and the replacement in general in the HoReCa sector of single-use packaging. We draw your attention that there are solutions on the market, in particular in some of significant member states, significant not because of their political or economic weight, but because their national market where the measures in the fast food sector have been put in application allows us, even after a short period of time, to see how things work and that things work. Alternatives to single-use packaging, the replacement of single-use packaging with reusable packaging works and makes sense. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Mr. Pierani. You highlighted some of the drivers that can contribute and can increase the contribution of consumers in this challenge. It's also true that we are coming from years in which the on-demand delivery has exploded, and we are a bit spoiled on having everything at home with a package of. So, what's your view on that point? Maybe it's a trivial question, but yes, the consumer responsibility. Where does it start?
Well, consumer responsibility is key, and I believe it has been mentioned. If we want to have a system that is more efficient, we need to embrace and engage the consumer in this new approach, because at the end of the day, if consumers, which by the way are all of us around the table, are not changing behaviors, then the solution will be with a lot of difficulty reaching the target and that we envisage. So this is a part of the chain. In order to do that, consumers need to be informed correctly. I have pointed out the issue of affordability, and I believe when it's information correctly, it should be also as simple as possible in order to be understood by average consumers. And this should be useful also for their life. So that is, consumers should be part of the game in a true way, not as a secondary part.
And Dirk Jacobs, Food Drink Europe represents big companies and small companies. Can you make the summary of the two positions? I mean, have you seen a different attitude of big ones and the small ones, or the point of view on the proposals on the table is almost the same?
Well, first of all, we are a very diverse sector in itself. So the considerations on packaging for solid products versus those of beverage products is already totally different. But even within categories or within business models, you will find a lot of diversity. And I think that needs to be recognized. And that's why I insist on the freedom for manufacturers to make their choice in the way that they want to materialize this transition to making their packaging more circular. That is absolutely critical. Between small and large companies, I think, of course, small companies are currently not dealing with this legislation. They are not involved in these discussions. and they're not even aware probably. So, and as I said, this is not the easiest piece of legislation to understand, even for someone like us here in the room. So I think we really need to do also a lot of work. Even when this is all done from a legislative point of view, we need to do a lot of work in bringing the SMEs along on this journey, making sure that they do not have too burdensome administrative requirements to start with and too many add-on costs, but also to make sure that they understand what is possible. And I would really try to do that in a very positive and constructive and incentivizing way. But also for the large companies, I think the issue is immensely complex, because if you have different business units, and okay, I maybe should give the floor to Wouter here, but with different business units, with different products, with product SKUs that are into the thousands and so forth, that really need to be changed. With international presence, I think we have, of course, with the US mission here, we have to realize that this has international impact as well, because you have importers into the EU, exporters from outside of the EU into the EU will have to comply. That all has to be changed and calibrated. Business strategies, investments will have to be redirected. So there's really a need for clarity. So I would not say that any of those has an easier time, but it is really needed to appreciate the diversity also in the way that the proposal is being developed. And I hope that we will see that back as well.
And to Mr. Vermeulen, concrete examples, you said that your company has agreements with the suppliers, with the other parts of the chain to minimize the packaging waste and so on. What are the concrete examples on that you can give us? I mean, is it so easy to talk to your suppliers and to let's say agree on packaging standard, on waste packaging standard, even the transporters, even the rest of the chain?
Well, it's twofold. So I would not underestimate, the awareness and the commitment of a lot of the packaging producers and of a lot of the actors across the packaging value chain. I wouldn't underestimate their commitment and their willingness to work towards, the climate goals that the EU has brought forward, right? Then obviously as an individual company, as you engage your business partners, it also comes down to partnership and co-creation and co-innovation. So I think that is really at the heart of the matter. And echoing some of Dirk's comments, I think that flexibility is really important, and look at the whole set of solutions and allowing the private sector actually to go after those solutions that make the most sense, both for the consumers, but also for the national context, because Europe is obviously united and diverse. So if you look at Norway, and reverse logistics in Norway is a very different ball game than doing packaging and reusable in a city like Paris, and so on and so forth, right? So I think that is what our key ask is. I think we are all very supportive of the long-term destination and decarbonizing as far as we can. But, I think the regulator should actually put in place the incentives to spur innovation and competition in the industry in the benefit of consumers and to the benefit of the planet, rather than just trying to capture everything through a very restrictive regulatory approach. I'm not saying the proposal is restrictive, right? But it's pointing to the two directions. There is value in actually unleashing innovation and competition in the private sector to drive solutions that don't exist yet today, that none of us here in the room might actually be able to envision, but that in 10 years, in 15 years time, will have a meaningful contribution to our common agenda. So I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, legislate for the future, not for the past.
Thanks, and I think that this issue will be discussed in the next event of the European Food Forum on the sustainable food systems law, maybe. That are ideas on how to incentivize innovation and incentivize investments in the industry, for instance, with the carbon market on food systems, I've heard, but this is not for today. Let's look let's look at the international efforts to reduce packaging waste. Our second panel. And our first speaker is Dr. Lashanda Curley, a US science envoy for plastic pollution, polymer scientist and director of the Center for Plastic Innovation at the University of Delaware. 5 minutes for you. Thanks.
I don't know if the slides are available, but if not, I will just go freeform here. So, sure, great. Thank you. All right. Oh, wonderful. So I just want to first thank the European Food Forum and the United States Mission to the EU for the invitation to be here, of course, the hosting MEPs and the moderator. So I want to first give a framework. I am a private citizen ambassador here to talk about some technical innovations related to plastics waste from a personal perspective. Next slide, please. So I'll just focus here and say that plastics are all around us. We've talked quite a bit about packaging, and from that standpoint, thinking about things like durability and convenience, of course, hygiene and safety, durability and availability that has been highlighted, of course, through the COVID-19 pandemic. But there are really features of plastics that are going to be extremely important as we start thinking about how we're going to continue to innovate for technology, right? So them being high strength to weight ratio, good barrier properties, all of these things are extremely important as we continue this dialogue of how we innovate and create more sustainable packaging aspects. Next slide, please. So for us, we think a lot about, of course, we've highlighted a lot of the challenges with plastics waste and plastic packaging. So environmental pollution, energy consumption, the fact that we have migration and those types of things. But there are enormous societal benefits that we need to take advantage of. And because of that, we already know here that plastics are not going to go away. We have to learn how to reimagine the plastics life cycle. And for us, we think a lot about this in terms of feedstock potential. So can we reimagine plastics waste as a feedstock? So we've heard a lot about reuse, we've heard a lot about recycling and even repairing of different types of plastic materials. Next slide, please. What I think is important, and I think it's been touched upon, but I want to highlight it because this is something that we think quite a bit about in terms of the work that we do in plastics innovation, is the complexity or heterogeneity in plastics waste, right? So there are many different plastic types, just as there are many different plastics packaging aspects. So they can be in powders, they can be in monoliths, they can be in foams, they can actually be, of course, in multi-layers. And all of these things really, really challenge how we think about sustainability related to packaging, but of course in plastic products in general. I'm a polymer person by trade. So for us, we think a lot about what are these features of the plastics that make up our different products that we talk about. So these could be whether they are thermosets or thermoplastics, how we actually process these and what's needed to do it. And so that could include the fact that we have many different, say, additives that are needed, right? So these are things that, if you think about packaging, antioxidants, we think about color, we think about all of these different things, stabilizers that are needed to actually address some of the challenges. That complexity means that now we're really going to be challenged as we start to think about recycling of these particular materials. And this is a global problem because each country, each city, each municipality actually is going to have different types of additives and fillers that are used in their different plastics production. And that also challenges our recycling aspects as well. How do we actually collect this complex waste? We heard about 14 different streams for packaging. And when I put out packaging at home, I mix everything together. And so how do we think about using that as a framework? Next slide, please. So here, I think there are many promising avenues as it relates to plastics waste, plastics recycling, and that could be new material innovation. So we heard about using natural resources, so using biomass. We try to think about non-food competitive biomass. So for us, thinking about things like lignin, a byproduct of the pulp and paper industry. How can we use those material systems to now think about recycle by design or creating materials that now enable circularity? But if you also think about the petroleum feedstocks that we're using, it's really important. I heard a lot and I was really excited about chemical recycling or advanced recycling as a pathway for being able to address these pieces. We think a lot about chemical deconstruction pathways that allow you to either recover the same building blocks or new building blocks that you can use to make new types of polymers. We also think about biological deconstruction. Nature is efficient, right? It has evolved to be able to address a lot of these challenges. So we can use microbial technology or enzyme engineering as a way to both deconstruct these materials, either in tandem with chemical recycling, or be able to use this to upcycle into new types of materials. Mechanical recycling will always play a role. And so I just want to highlight that these are a suite of activities, suites of different approaches that are going to be important as we tackle this on from a global perspective. When you think about how we all use and interact with plastics, that's going to be different and specific, to each country, and to each state. If I think about the United States, and so for us, we want to really focus on how we rethink materials, how we redesign new processes, and how we redirect to new markets as we approach this particular problem. Next slide, please. And so for us, we try to focus on how we can redesign processes toward utilization. And that allows us to address chemical challenges. I heard earlier today in thinking about that we need to allow people to address and contemplate all of the different strategies so that they can really focus on some of the sustainability markets. For us, we want to use a strong foundation of polymer science and engineering, catalysis coupled with LCA and TEA technologies to really be able to address the complexity of plastics waste so that we can generate a range of different products and direct to new markets to address all of the things that we've been talking about today. Next slide. I just want to highlight some promising new approaches that I think we should really consider in addition to some of the chemical recycling work that we've talked about. So we can use nature biocatalysis. As I mentioned, there's a little mealworm that can actually deconstruct different types of polymers, right? So polyethylene material systems. We can also use biosynthesis as a way to enable new pathways to new types of building blocks, as well as to functionalized material systems. And again, highlighting that we can use natural feedstocks that you can balance for end-of-life sustainability. And I want to highlight here that it doesn't mean that just because it came from a biosource that it's automatically biodegradable or that it's non-toxic. So there has to be inputs. We talked today earlier about the convergence of different fields to be able to address these. So these should not be in silos. Next slide, please. So in terms of rethinking plastics globally, I think we need to really think about what are the plastic feedstocks that we can use. So are there different inputs, both from a plastics waste perspective, but also from biomass that we can use to enable sustainability on the front end of the production process? And then how we use these material systems. So can we manufacture, can we think about polymer manufacturing to enable recycling? And that involves things like reducing complexity of the materials that we're using. Can we reduce the amount of fillers or additives that we're using? But also think about, can we use all single component material systems? Again, these are simple strategies that we can start to implement at the manufacturing stage. And then also to inform how consumers use plastics, right? So really being able to think about, do you need single-use plastics, right? I know that's been banned in a lot of places, but not everywhere. So how do we use packaging in that perspective? But then also how we collect waste, right? That's another factor in being able to reduce complexity. Next slide. So I think that, a real conversation here, and I've seen through my visits here, is around really looking at real plastics. A lot of the technology has been done on very pristine material systems. I think that from a technological perspective, more people and lots of colleagues are thinking about this in terms of real plastics formulations that are actually used by industry. So partnerships with industry to really think about what are the challenges, what are the material complexity challenges, and how can we still get the same performance with these types of material systems? Something that is not always relevant to packaging, but materials that are used that may be in foams or in thermoset forms. So we think a lot about how we interface with those material systems and being able to use different recycling strategies to approach that. Next slide. And I will also say that plastics are a community concern. I think this meeting here is evidence of that, where we really need to have scientific achievements. And I've really delighted to hear the focus on science and technology innovations. And that means all of the different materials. That means looking at polymer science, computational modeling, data science, all of these tools that will inform things like LCA and TA analysis. But we need to form community partnerships for stakeholder inclusion. And we also need to consider the social aspects of this, right? So environmental justice, social justice, who's really going to be impacted? And does everyone have a seat at the table as we're designing new policies and procedures? And I think there has to be this idea of true partnership and also consumer education as a way to frame the discussion and to really aid adoption of the new practices that we have in place. Next slide. I think I'm almost done. Yes. All right, so I'll just leave you here that I think there's a mountain of ways to climb with key targets around rethinking material systems, redesigning processes, and then redirecting to new markets. And for me, I really want to hone in on the fact that this idea of having all the stakeholders at the table, much as is happening here today, but involving consumers, involving small production facilities are going to be extremely important as we tackle plastics waste, especially sustainable packaging. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Curley. Now it's the time for the speech of Karsten Wachholz. He's co-lead at Secretariat of the Business Coalition for a Global Plastic Treaty at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation.
Thank you and good afternoon to all. I also prepared a couple of slides to talk you through. Let's see when they make it up to the screen. Maybe a few introductory remarks. I'm very thankful for Dr. Corley laying out the complexity of the material and chemical composition that we are talking about as plastics and material. And now we are zooming out, and we need to zoom out very heavily using the headline of one of your slides, which was called Rethinking Plastics Globally. I think that's the challenge what governments around the world are trying to undertake over these 2 years to conclude negotiations on a new international agreement to end plastic pollution. As the moderator kindly introduced me, I'm working for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We work closely together with WWF International to convene the Business Coalition for a Global Plastics Treaty. This coalition brings together more than 100 businesses, financial institutions, NGO partners, which either are from the plastics value chain or work with the plastics value chain, and they are all committed to support the development of an ambitious, effective, and legally binding UN treaty to end plastic pollution. And if you go to the next slide, you can take a look on that tiny screen if you recognize some of the tiny logos, but some of the companies and partners are actually sitting at the table, which we are very thankful for. I think an important note in terms of the discussion that we had today in the first panel, which was focusing on developing a regulatory framework at the EU level to address packaging specifically. The framing at the international level is different. So it's not about packaging waste. It's about addressing plastic pollution across the whole life cycle. Packaging is one of the many applications. But obviously, as we also experience at the EU level, it makes a difference if you design a regulatory framework to tackle a specific material, a specific product, or a specific sector like packaging. And this will be the big challenge that by trying to resolve the plastic pollution challenge, that we are getting at some point to a stage where we help governments addressing the key sectors and plastic applications. But you will see from my introductory remarks, most governments have clearly packaging and other single-use, short-lived plastic products in mind when they're talking about the plastics treaty. But officially, the treaty should address all sorts of plastics across a broad variety of sectors and applications. Next slide, please. So all the organizations in our coalition started to have a discussion about what is our joint vision on plastics, so not packaging specifically. And they have all endorsed by their leadership a vision statement, a joint vision statement that spells out what we want the Global Plastics Treaty to support. So it's centered around the ambition to create a circular economy in which plastics never become waste or pollution, and the value of products and materials that contain plastics are actually retained in the economy. And then we have broken that down into 3 critical areas where we think that progress must be achieved. And they are complementary. I think we heard before, we don't like bans, or we don't like this, or we want to recycle. In our view, all 3 strategies need to work together. Given all the growth projections in terms of economic growth, population growth, how much more plastics will be put on the market until 2060, there must be a reduction of plastic production and use, ideally through a circular economy approach. Only if we get to a reasonable level of plastic use worldwide, we actually have a chance to build the systems and infrastructures to circulate all the plastics that we cannot eliminate. And then we have to acknowledge, if this is a decades effort, there will always be no perfect systems. There will be leakage which goes into an environment which is hard to abate, and either we prevent them or we need to remediate these sources of pollution. Next slide, please. In the coming days, we will make our policy recommendations for the next round of negotiations, which will take place in Paris at the end of May, publicly available on our website. So please watch that space when you're finally receiving the slides. But you see a bit of an overview what we have discussed with our members over the last couple of weeks. It also includes a bit of an assessment how these elements that we want to see in the treaty have been reflected by member states in their own submissions to the process. I think it's important to note that we are starting from our vision, and yes, there should be an overarching objective to protect the environment, human health from negative impacts of plastic pollution. But if the treaty would stop there and then leave everyone to somehow do something about it, that would not be enough in our view. So the businesses that we are working with expect that we develop the treaty to develop a toolbox for governments that help them actually achieve those ambitions. And yeah, you will see in these boxes, so on reduction, we look at things which would include of virgin plastics, eliminating problematic plastics, promoting reuse options and new delivery models. And the circulation, we look into product design, recycling systems, and the 2 need to be linked together, which we just heard in the previous presentation. We look into the important role for EPR and DRS policies as examples, but also the current obstacles to increase the use of recycled plastics, and obviously recognizing the important role that the informal sector, waste sector plays in all of this in many countries around the world. And then for prevention remediation, we don't feel we are necessarily best placed entity to look at this, but we acknowledge the improvement of waste management, governance, and capabilities is key. And we also want the treaty to specifically address microplastics. Next slide, please. I think there are, I would like to pull out a few examples of key elements that are currently limited in understanding or not well defined in the preparations for that next round of negotiations in Paris. There's a document that should help governments to structure their talks about the different options for the treaty. And we think before we are developing any legal text for the treaty, we need to make sure that delegations understand the concepts behind them. I think all 3 of them are quite familiar with people in this room. We talked already about reuse. Many people have only simply in mind, oh, you pay a deposit and you bring something back to the shop. As pointed out, there are many more ways of how we could avoid single-use packaging in particular. It's not only about food, it's also other sectors where we could think about how do we actually deliver products to the clients and how can they make best use of it. And that, in our view, the treaty must play a key role, not only looking at prescribing the design, not prescribing the design of these systems, but looking what's needed in terms of support for shared and standardized reuse infrastructure, for example, because those systems become much more efficient if not every company, every individual organization tries to set up their own systems. The second area is recyclability, where we already see a technical understanding saying, look, something needs to be designed for recycling. But we see that this is in itself not enough. So it's actually the two things need to come together. The technical recyclability, whatever standards and requirements we are trying to harmonize for different constituencies around the world, and how they are linked with what kind of infrastructure systems we are building up. If the two don't match to each other, some of the companies around the table may be front runners and having redesigned all their packaging, but they may not end up being recycled in practice and at scale. And I think this concept is now enshrined also in the proposals for the EU packaging waste regulation. And I think as a principle based, we need to incorporate these elements also in the global treaty. And last but not least, especially from a business perspective, we make a strong point that extended producer responsibility schemes, if we design them properly, is the only way forward to actually mobilize the funding needed to ramp up these systems to ensure circularity of plastics. We need to prioritize, starting with high impact sectors like packaging, where we currently, which becomes waste very quickly and where we have the biggest challenges. But we see that many governments think, yeah, EPR sounds great. We may agree on some non-binding guidelines, what EPR could look like, or we could develop only national approaches to EPR. We think if we want to seize the opportunity to harmonize regulations, at least on a regional basis, the treaty should equip governments with more tools and criteria how to design effective EPR schemes. I think that's it. If there's a last slide, it's basically just for you to memorize our logo and where to find us. And I'm looking forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Now the floor goes to Felix Basati, Director of Global Circular Packaging at Mars.
Yes. So hi, everyone. I also have 2 slides only to share. So if we can bring them online. So thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's great being in this panel. And I will share the brand owner perspective, but mainly from an infrastructure perspective, which is something that we control less. We control better our design, but the infrastructure, we control it less. So if we can go directly to the next slide, please. So we talk a lot about circular economy, but just bringing here the stakes at the global level. At the global level, we are lucky enough being in Europe. We are lucky enough to have this regulation in place. But if we look at our world globally, we are mainly operating in what we call a linear economy. So we are, and especially for packaging, we are generating a lot of waste that sometimes might lead to pollution. We are depending in limited resources, so in the case of plastic, on oil. And no matter what we do, for example, for our packaging to reduce it or to reuse, to have more usable packaging, we'll still have single-use packaging that will need to be recycled in a way. And if we look at the global level, the population that is growing, but also the middle class that is growing, meaning more consumption as such, in absolute amounts, the amount of waste that will be generated, but also the resources that we'll need will just increase. So we really need to find a way to circulate, what Carsten was mentioning, to circulate those single-use material. To circulate those single-use materials, there are really three conditions in place. The first one is the design. So how we design a single-use packaging by giving it the maximum of chances to be recycled and being captured by the system. This, I would say, is relatively easier for the brand owners because we really control the design of our packaging. We control what type of materials we can place in the market. The second piece of it is the infrastructure as such in place. So this packaging will need to be collected, will need to be sorted, will need to be recycled. Here is what we call the shared responsibility. So we do not have a full control, but we can influence. And luckily now, for example, in Europe, we can influence through the EPR schemes because in a way we are paying for the recycling. And the third piece of it, it's like now that this recycled material was generated, we can bring it back to our products. And here again, as brand owners, we can decide how much recycled material we can use. And we can boost in a way this circulation by using more and more recycled material. As I was saying, and if we can please go to the next slide, as I was saying, the biggest challenge is the infrastructure. And this infrastructure, it's very local. So here you have a graph of 3 countries. So the first one is Indonesia, not Poland, which is the other way around, the flag. The second one is the US, and the third country is Belgium. The dark blue line is showing the packaging recycling rate. I was not able to find it for Indonesia. But you can see it for the US and Belgium. The light blue, it will be the plastic recycling rate in these countries, and the yellow one will be the paper one. Interestingly enough, the recycling rate in Indonesia, it's around 10%. And this 10%, it's mainly through the informal sector. Okay, so the waste pickers, the people that they will collect packaging and for their living, maybe $5 a day, they will try to grab as much as possible. So for example, a PET bottle sold in Indonesia will probably be recycled, but will still remain some of them that might end up as a waste in nature, but will have a high chance to be recycled. The challenge that we have in Indonesia is what I called in the second part of this graph, the mismanaged waste. The mismanaged waste in Indonesia, they are more than 60%. So means that they are either waste that they are not collected to start with, or waste that they are collected, but they are just simply not properly managed. So might be open dumps, and with the first rain, they will end up in the rivers and then in the sea. The US, and I have intentionally placed there a lot of points. I think these are from the EPA, so the Environmental Protection Agency. So you can see the recycling rates in the US, and we can focus on plastic, the light blue, which was 6% in 2000, and it has greatly improved to 8% in 2017. So ironically enough, in the US, the recycling rate of plastics is even lower than the one in Indonesia. But as you can see, the problem with the mismanaged waste is much more limited because in the worst case scenario in the US, we will landfill. We might not recycle, but we'll still landfill, and probably in some cases we'll recycle. And then, I mean, in the way the winner is the Belgium, but yes, first of all, the mismanaged waste are very limited. I think like in Europe, it's around 2 or 3%. Still a problem, but it's quite limited when we compare, for example, to Indonesia. And the recycling rate of plastics, we see that it's increasing year after year. If I'm not mistaken, it's around 50% reported last year. Now, the whole point is like, what makes Belgium different than the US and Indonesia? Because it seems that we know how to manage waste. It's not a technological challenge. We know how to collect, to put a bin, to have a truck. We know how to sort. They are very common sorting technologies, and we know how to recycle. I mean, being it mechanical recycling or the chemical recycling that it's coming. The main difference, it's first of all, the points that I have listed there, but it's first of all, the consumer awareness. So we were talking about it. It's definitely the regulations. We need to keep in mind that the recycling, and in particular, the recycling of plastic, it is not a profitable business as such. So if a major has to decide what will do with the waste, the recycling is the most expensive option. So in a way, someone needs to pay for this. And that's why in Europe, we pay through the EPR fees, but we need to keep this in mind. The type of collection, it's important. In the US, we mainly have what we call the commingled bin. It's definitely easier for the consumer, so we throw every type of packaging in one bin. But as we can see here from an efficiency perspective, it's more challenging. Where in Europe, in majority of countries, we have the segregated collection, like a dedicated bin for paper, for glass, and the rest, the lightweight packaging. There is definitely extremely important the waste management in administration and financing. So here I'm just talking about the residual bin. We consider it probably a luxury here, but in Indonesia, for example, they don't even have one bin just to throw the waste. There are regions that they continue to throw, packaging just in the rivers. There is definitely important to properly finance the recycling infrastructure through the EPR fees. The type of the EPR, so it's not only like having an EPR, but the type of EPR, especially the one that it's in Belgium through the net cost and the eco-modulation, makes a lot of sense. Because the packaging that it's well recycled will pay less, but the packaging that it's more difficult to recycle will need to pay more. And I think the ownership also is playing a role. The recycling, for example, in the US, it's mainly managed by the municipalities, so that are the ones that they are financing the recycling, where the recycling in Europe, it's managed through the EPR fees by the brand owners. One good news for the US, I don't know if you saw it in the news, but we finally have an EPR scheme in the US, in Colorado. Who will have thought it, I think, a few years back, but this is a great news, and we hope to have more because, it's really pity for the US being the richest country in the world and not having one of the best infrastructures outside there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bezzati. Mr. Lalani, that is the Director for Strategy and Stakeholder Relations at Tetra Pak.
Thanks very much, and really appreciate the opportunity from the European Food Forum and Louisa, and having the opportunity with the U.S. mission and our honorable guests from the Parliament as well. I thought maybe because when you think about packaging waste and you think about this in a circular economy, it can be quite conceptual. So I want to bring an example for you, a story I have. When I first arrived here, I'm Canadian, and I came here to Brussels in 2015. And the first thing I did is I went to the grocery store and I was looking around for eggs. I couldn't find them anywhere. And I was searching and everything, and I finally went to the shop owner and I said, "Where are the eggs?" in my broken French. And she said, "They're on the shelf beside the chocolate bars." And in Canada, eggs are in the fridge. And here they are on the shelf. And I was very confused. I said, "What's going on? Why are they not in the fridge?" And the lady looked at me with a big smile and she said, and I'll never forget what she said. She said, "What do you think? Chickens lay cold eggs?" And besides the joke, what this really made me consider actually is that, there was some cultural differences here that obviously I was learning very firsthand. And I was taking actually for granted really important things about food safety and about how there can be a disconnect between societal expectations and policy implementation. And this can lead to major food safety and related challenges. And I think that's really shaped my thinking at Tetra Pak, whose mission it is to make food safe and available everywhere. The company operates in 160 countries around the world. We have 25,000 employees around the world. In Europe, it's about 10,000. In the United States, it's about 1,500 people. And we pioneered 7 years ago the aseptic technology, which is to help keep highly perishable foods safe without a cold chain and without refrigeration and without any additives or preservatives. And if you look at some of these foods, this has allowed our customers to reach all parts of the world. And I think that's really the starting point for this technology. And I think that's where we need to not forget when we're looking at new policies about packaging waste. And also, if you look at sort of the food systems transition and really about the topic for today from the European Food Forum, Tetra Pak believes the systems are changing. So efforts are already underway to shift to mainly a plant-based diet, to looking to more natural ingredients, for example, even to foods that are fortified or enriched with added nutrition or vitamins. All of these foods are actually more perishable than the foods we have in the market today. They spoil quick. And so you need special processing, packaging, filling machines to be able to handle this. And so Tetra Pak believes our technology is going to be more needed in the future, not less. So that's really the starting point from where we see this. And I want to really just focus on sort of three key areas. If you are looking from our experience on looking at policy implementation, and really the EU, and we heard a lot about the work here, is really a leader in this, and they have set the direction of travel very clear to reduce waste, to ensure that all products, all packaging are reusable, repairable, firstly, recyclable at the end of the scale. So the direction of travel is very clear. But when you look at sort of how the EU has actually implemented or embedded this food systems perspective into their circular economy policy, we believe it's missing. And that's because the focus has really been on the end of life elements of this and really focused on packaging waste and not really considering that there's a systems approach to this, looking at food safety, looking at resiliency, and looking at how we can ensure access and safe access to foods. So one concrete recommendation I have, if you are looking into setting up circular economy policy, is to look at what the EU did on the Critical Raw Materials Act. And there, they took into account the resiliency aspects, particularly related to the war in Ukraine and COVID, and those have really taught us about ensuring resiliency in legislation and making sure things are available. And I think that is the first consideration if you are to look at circular economy policy. How do you embed food systems resiliency into the policy from the start? The second thing I want to talk about here is investment certainty. And so together here, we are with the US mission. And I would like to say that the opportunities that the US provide in terms of their legal frameworks are pretty good. They give certainty, they give a bit of policy certainty as well for companies like Tetra Pak and our customers to invest. And Tetra Pak is investing heavily today. We're spending 100 million euros per year to design the world's most sustainable food package. One that is made fully of renewable materials, that's fully recyclable, but never ever compromising on food safety. The problem is, or the challenge is that every time we are making steps towards this and this systems level change, we get new legislation or new requirements that make it more difficult for us to follow through with those investments. And I think that for us has really been a key concern. The last thing I'd like to share with you, especially because we are talking about, I guess, what I call this international diplomacy on green policy, I think we should do more field trips. You know, Tetra Pak and the companies around the table here have a lot to offer and can bring policymakers, stakeholders, civil society to our factories to really understand how the systems work, how things are created, what are some of the realities that we need to face, what are some of the commercial pressures, and how are investments made. And I think that's really something that I would really like to propose, that we can do more of these field trips and more of these discussions. So I'll leave it with that, and I look forward to some of the questions from the audience.
Thanks. And now it's the turn of Pilar Perez. I lost my... Sorry. Sorry. Senior Packaging Development Manager at Kraft Heinz. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with such a level of experts to discuss this topic, which is quite complex, that we have heard already along the discussion. First of all, I'd like to say that Kraft Heinz acknowledged the threat and the concern that the packaging waste has for the environment, and we support on taking actions to eliminate and reduce whenever is possible and without unintended consequences. Said that, for us, minimization is a key strategy to go to that. And the need of a regulation like this one, it's with clear targets to bring us consistency is really, really necessary, not only from the industry point of view, but also for the consumers, because we also need the engagement of the consumer here. In the effort of minimizing, we have two key points that I would like to highlight here today is increased recycling. We have already discussed it, but I would like to give some examples, but also continue innovation. In terms of increased recycling, it's not only the mechanical recycling, but also point out the advanced or chemical recycling. And this requires a lot of engagement from the consumer. It requires also the infrastructure, the involvement of the regulators or the governments, but also the producer. And it's a complex matter, as we all know. But I would like to give an example that we have recently, that is in a partnership that we have with Tesco, that is one of the biggest retailers in UK, as you may know, where we collected front of store, so the consumer were bringing the flexible packaging waste front store. It was collected, it was sorted, and from that, we found out that 60% of that was mechanically recycled, so that should remain there. 20% was deemed unrecyclable, which then it was taken for energy recover. And the other 20% is the one that we upcycle into food contact material to be incorporated on our packaging for our products. And this we manage thanks to the methods of the advanced recycling. So the biggest takeaway here is the consumer engagement. So we give them a meaning to the task of bringing the waste to the front of store. And we think that was very important. We're trying to explore how to deploy this type of initiatives all over the rest of the international zone. The second point, that is the continuous innovation. Here, we all know that there are a lot of new technologies, new materials, new sorting systems, even artificial intelligence here. And that's why we think that any ban will be detrimental for the innovation. And instead of that, we really support to have a clear criteria on the requirements to be met instead of having any bans, because we do think that innovation is the key here to look through the future. We should find solutions of today's problems or tomorrow problems as well, but we need to have it as future-proof as possible and leave the door open also for new technologies. And here I would like to give the example because we focus a lot on alternatives materials. So, and one of the partnerships or co-development that we are having is with Pulpex to have 100% paper-based recyclable bottle. There is still work to do here, and I'm not saying that we should change everything to that, but it's how we push boundaries and how technology and innovation give us a way to do things a bit different in order to have different results. Thank you very much.
Thanks to Pilar Perez. Questions from the room? Yes. Please state your name, the organization you belong to, and to whom you want to address your question.
Yeah, so this is Rafael Laura from Michigan State University. My question is actually for the panel, but maybe for the legislation part. And it was referred to the comment of Coca-Cola also. It seems that the legislation still have a large point of view of the waste hierarchy driving the whole legislation. And there is all this impact study of life cycle assessment at the end, but we're still talking about a ranking system of what drives the waste scenario. I would like to have a little more conversation in that part. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when waste we measure by volume and by weight, that makes sense. But nowadays, when we measure environmental footprint assessment and environmental footprint indicators, that hierarchy is a little obsolete in the sense of driving a part of decision making. So I think that with new tools that we have, it seems like the hierarchy, it will change in many cases. And the answer here is what we don't like is it depends in most of the cases. And if you do a material flow analysis on all Europe, it will depend.
Excuse me, what's the question?
The question is that, so why, it seems that the waste hierarchy is still driving the whole legislation process there.
And it is, how to say, extensively recognized as the appropriate compass for policy making. And actually, until now, I haven't met only or heard only one challenge to this, yours. So I haven't understood your reasoning behind challenging the waste hierarchy.
I always think to put the flag in something, one type of scenario when that is the lower, sometimes it may not come the high environmental footprint, is actually will not drive the innovation. I think with all the science that we have behind. So it's okay to have the waste hierarchy there, but I think the challenge to look at the environmental footprint to analyzing all the cases. The European Union has done a lot in measuring that, and you mentioned the impact of the study there and looking at the environmental footprint declaration, the carbon footprint formula. But I think that it requires a little more thought behind that in order to put a ranking on the end-of-life scenario.
Yeah, my comment is the following, and also hearing other elements and arguments which have been made here, is that even if we would rely exclusively on sustainability criteria, the practical consequence is that a certain set of criteria will still exclude a certain number of solutions existing on the market. The second truth we need to look into the eyes is to see what are the negative externalities of certain practices which are currently on the market, and how waste is generated, and how it depletes resources, and what are the existing patterns. And the third truth we need to look into the eyes also is that we need to be aware that without certain radical changes, things will not be sustainable even in the shorter run, let aside the longer run. So certain investments will need to be, adjusted, indeed on the basis of innovation and technological change. And we believe that this is not just a distant prospect. So future innovation will bring in the future, in an undefined future, technological change that will facilitate in the undefined future practical change. We believe, and it's not a belief, there are facts and examples on the market of technologies and management solutions. Indeed, not only technologies are necessary, management solutions are necessary, and they exist currently on the market, allowing a shift to more sustainable patterns and solutions. So you've said you are representing whom exactly?
I'm from the School of Packaging, Michigan State University, some academia.
And Michigan State University?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I would no questions? Another one for who?
This question is so my name is Chris Bradley, and I am the Chief Marketing and Sustainability Officer at Aurora Packaging. We're a global packaging company. So my question is really directed towards maybe Felix and Ms. Perez around flexible packaging. It is really, I think, enabled us to eliminate a lot of food waste, especially some of these multi-layer films. that have extended the shelf life of a lot of products and probably reduced a lot of food waste that otherwise would have happened. And so I'm just wondering, with regulations like the PPWR, that may make it hard to continue to use some of those multi-layer films, do you think that you will develop the technologies to create either monomaterial films or other types of flexible packaging that will keep the same type of performance that you get in flexible packaging today?
Yeah, you're right. We do have multi-layer materials for a reason. So we have a layer material that is for barrier. We have the layer material that is for runnability and sealability. And then we also have the layer that is also for the printing technology. So that's why we had it all these years. As I said, innovation is the key here. And innovating, we have already working on monomaterial solution or mixed polyolefin solutions, and we are working on that. And of course, there are challenges that we are facing, and slowly but firm, we are finding solutions together with our suppliers as well. So yeah.
Yeah, very quickly to complete and making a link also with Dr. Corley, the main two resins used for flexible is P and PP, okay? They are multi-layer flexible packaging, but they are progress also on switching to monomaterial. So we believe that there is a place for flexible packaging. Belgium as a country is an example that we're only, I mean, for the ones that they are here long time, historically they were only collecting bottles, and since 2 or 3 years now, they are collecting all type of packaging, including flexibles. And they have been able to find solutions also to recycle flexible packaging. Now, there is a challenge with flexible packaging that as a PET bottle, for example, cannot come back to food grade applications. And this is why we are calling for the chemical advanced recycling to be in place. So in companies such as Mars, that we mainly need food grade material, we can take our responsibility and using this recycled material back. So to make flexibles work in a way, collection is needed, sorting is needed, but also chemical recycling at scale. And the design piece, of course.
Thanks. I would have a question for Dr. Curley, because there is something that has been raised on an issue that has been raised in the questions that the EFF received. It's about bioplastics and biodegradability. What is the situation for the rules on definition on that in the United States?
So in terms of rules and definitions, I think that that's still evolving. I think that there's still misconception that if you make something from a biological source, wood, corn, that it automatically is degradable. But that is not true. And we have to think about what are the conditions to enable that. Is that something that is congruent with our current recycling strategies? Do we have to have special composting sites with very, very specific conditions? So I think that we're learning more, and it's going to be really tied to the actual source that you're using for the bioplastic. I think we have to spread the message more that biomass does not mean degradable. It also doesn't mean that it's non-toxic. And so there has to be a partnership to really kind of set definitions and policies. People are trying, right? But there's still not a unified theme around that. I think I attend many talks where people automatically say, I made it from this, so now I have a biodegradable material, right? And so we have to start to address those pieces.
So a lot of work to do on that as well. Mr. Wackels, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is a front runner in circular economy. And you have seen this this treaty, the concerns about the plastic waste and the treaty growing in a sense. How it has changed? I mean, the attitude, we have seen the situation in the States, Indonesia, Belgium, and US is very different. But what's about the attitude of those states, of emerging economies versus developed economies, for instance? Is that kind of scheme at work, or it's even more differentiated?
I think we got a glimpse of that from Felix's slides, no, comparing different countries. I think in the treaty negotiations, countries recognize that a circular economy approach has a role to play, but obviously the starting points are quite different. And many countries recognize the complexity that Dr. Curley has laid out, that it will be very challenging to build up circular systems for the broad variety of everything we're using. That's why we are saying design and probably reducing the complexity of the different plastic uses that we are currently envisioning is key to then design the systems for circularity. And I think this is only gradually being understood, because if you would simply look at everything what is put out on the market today, you would lose very quickly faith that you would ever be able to catch up to build all the systems to circulate those plastics. So I think that's why why we developed these three elements. No system will be perfect. Circularity on itself will not resolve everything. So we need to reduce, we need to circulate, and we need to prevent and remediate. These are the three pillars that we also got a very broad alignment across the industry as a common understanding. And now it's a bit the challenge for each country to say, okay, what kind of support do we need from the international level that we can increase our capabilities to put the solutions in place? And that's why I think the whole idea about having global rules, which then still hopefully lead to harmonized policy and regulatory approaches at the national level, we need to make sure that we are not ending up with 193 different solutions to the problem, but certainly we need to recognize that there are regional differences and we need to develop different prototypes, basically what circularity means for packaging, what does it mean for textiles, what does it mean for other sectors. And I mean, if you put it all together and want to grasp that complexity in a 2 years multilateral negotiation process, I think elements like the waste hierarchy are principle-based. It's not the full truth, but it gives a bit the guidance to these negotiations, how to structure which policy instruments would be needed. Not strictly saying you can't do one without the other, but giving a bit of guidance what will be needed to land on a more comprehensive and coordinated policy approach.
Thanks. And a final question from myself for Mr. Lalani. You say that could you please elaborate a bit further on this food system resiliency concept that is missing in the regulation that is currently under discussion at the EU level?
Sure, I'm happy to. I mean, if I just take our European business, for example, so in Europe, 154 billion liters of highly perishable foods are consumed, and this was last year. So these are milks, juices, broths, plant-based milks and things like this that are there. And this is roughly, I think it's 300 liters per person, about a liter per person per day. Every year, every day. And I think for our American colleagues, it's something like 35 ounces or so per day. And so this is quite a lot. And this is consumed today in Europe. And so we also know that food waste and loss is a huge element. Europeans waste something like 120 kilograms of food each year. And so, we have in parts of the world, we have malnutrition problems, we have hunger problems, and we have obesity challenges. And so we also know from a geopolitical perspective what the war has caused in terms of food pricing and what that did to close corridors on food, and also what COVID did to also close, even within a single market like Europe, its own boundaries. And so from our perspective, we think that we must keep resiliency at the heart of any types of legislation, particularly when it comes to food. And this is really the core of it. And so I really liked what the EU Commission and therefore also the Parliament and the Council did with the Critical Raw Materials Act, where they prioritized resiliency in that piece of legislation or policy framework. That isn't there in the circular economy policy framework today.
Thanks for clarification. I finished my questions, and now I give the floor to Pietro Fiocchi for the closing remarks, and then to Irene Tolleré for the final greetings.
Very difficult topic, because also I do not envy the DG Envy, because when you do an impact assessment, obviously, when you look at recycling versus reuse and so on and so on and so on, it's strictly related from an environmental and economic point of view to the density of population and to the value of the material to be recycled. In other words, I lived 20 years ago in Newark, Missouri. We were not recycling anything because the distance to bring the material to somewhere else to be recycled was too long. And the same level, we have a little village north of my town, which is probably the smallest municipality in Italy, and it is 13 people. I mean, you read the newspaper, you drink a beer, you probably, from an economic and environmental point of view, you're better off to throw it in the woods than to have a truck driving 50 kilometers, pick up the wood, the paper and the glass and bring it back for recycling. So it's quite a difficult solution. Italy is very strong in recycling, but probably because the cost of the land and the availability of the land is very high the cost and very low the availability. Back again to Missouri, it's nothing to have a landfill and throw waste inside the land. So it's very difficult to get one solution which is good for everybody. Extremely difficult. There are different approaches. There are different technologies. If you look at recyclability in Europe, you see Italy and Belgium on the top, with totally different approach, because Italy is more on the differentiated collection. So we have like 12, 14 different type of color sacks to put the glass, the aluminum, so on. Belgium is much more on automatic sorting devices. So they collect everything and they sort them and they recycle. They get some incredible results, which is very good, but very difficult, very different. And each solution can be applied to different countries in a different way. What else? You touch a lot of topics. The last one that Mrs. Corley was talking about, this is one of the things that I do not like very much on the approach of the EU Commission, because they've been quite undecided about bioplastic, compostable plastic, biodegradable plastic, because one day one was okay, but the next day was not okay, compostable was okay, but no, there's coming CO2 during the compostables, and so on and so on and so on. And unluckily, from a private industry point of view, it's a problem, because you need to have a visibility of at least 10 or 15 years, otherwise you do not invest the money to handle the problem. At the end, and I want to close because Irene is going to say something much more intelligent than what I'm saying now, but number one, and I agree with Mr. Lalani, remember about this, that Europe has dependency. It's not only gas from Russia, it's grain, it's seeds, it's animal feed, there's everything else. So it's very important to look also from this type of perspective, especially regarding how much food we throw away in our continent. And last, and this is my opinion, and what I will tell the Commission, and I will tell to all my fellow shadow rapporteur, in my opinion, we do not want to mandate a technology or a solution that is good for all Europe. We need to have a solution with very strong goals regarding the reduction of the use of landfill, number one. Then reduction of the use of incinerator, which do not produce heat or electricity. The next incinerator that use they produce heat and so on. And go in a direction, but leave all the areas to find a solution to reduce this waste and be much more circular and much more good for the environment and for the economy. For this, I close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague, and thank you all of you for having made this event possible. Even though I'm supposed to be quick, I will give you a little anecdote, because when I was elected later mayor to a very big city in the south of France with 354 inhabitants, then I started discovering that biodegradability for consumers was not exactly what we all took for granted. And if you throw something down the loose, then it sticks all the system, because in fact, biodegradability takes 3 weeks, and no packaging was talking about this little problem. And then afterwards, in 2015, I saw a movie called Demain. And in the movie called Demain, there was the case of San Francisco. And so I was elected in my little mayor city, and we were having big problem with all the treating the waste and all that. And then I discovered that in San Francisco, they had more than 95% of recyclability of everything. And with all the mayors from the community, we were like, okay, can we do it? No, because we cannot do it alone. To manage goals like that, we need to have a global approach and exchange on solution with when we find them. So that means that the packaging and the big brands, and also the supermarkets that sell, but also the local communities, we need to talk together and make sure that we produce robust pieces of legislation. But then also we need to help everybody and talk to the consumer to explain to him that this is not a choice that he has. He needs to really get, we all need to get our act together and put the things that need to be recycled in the correct bin, otherwise all the chain will fail. So basically, this is the whole idea of the European Food Forum, to all of us talk together and exchange on good practices, identify them, make sure that when we, as co-legislators, work on a piece of legislation, we do not we do not put a brake on good ideas, and also identify all the bad things that can happen and make sure that the pieces of legislation that we develop, they stop the problems. So the packaging waste and all this recycling is a very big piece, and I'm very happy that all of us, we have bridged a little more and managed to be a bit more intelligent when we get out of this room than when we entered it. That's for me anyway. And thank you all of us, and we go on like that. I think that we have got a good recipe. If we have a 360 approach and all the chain we discuss together, there is a high probability that what we will do in the end will be more efficient and more practical. So thank you very much, and a big applause to all of you. Thank you.